Welcome viewers, this is Dr. J.W. Ayub, theologist since 1994 from the Central Coast, New South Wales, Australia. We're doing the Muhammad and the verified revelation structure of the people of the book. We've safely arrived at episode 9, entitled The Growing Separation. Now, in the previous episode, viewers, the expectation of recognition, the recognition of the new Islamic ideology conceived by Muhammad, began tightening around Muhammad's emerging proclamation as comparison with prior revelation became unavoidable, particularly after his rejection by the people of the book. In this episode, the separation itself starts becoming increasingly visible. Not immediately, not all at once, but progressively. Because once verification tensions remain unresolved long enough, distance begins forming naturally between competing revelation structures. At first, the differences still appeared manageable, mostly theological, mostly interpretive, mostly survivable. But viewers, theological divergence rarely remains contained once authority, continuity and revelation legitimacy begin separating at the foundation level. Especially once competing structures begin defining revelation authority, prophetic continuity, covenant identity, interpretive legitimacy, and theological inheritance. Because eventually one framework starts refining and redefining what the other framework already considered established and verified. And once that process begins, relational distance slowly follows theologically a distance. And this is where the atmosphere changes. Conversations become more cautious. Recognition becomes less assumed. Tension becomes harder to conceal. And eventually the listener begins noticing something difficult. The same words no longer fully mean the same thing. God, revelation, prophet, scripture, authority, continuity. The language remains familiar, viewers, but the underlying framework progressively shifts underneath the terminology itself. And that's where separation deepens psychologically, spiritually, physically, and theologically. Not merely through open hostility, through divergence, through reinterpretation, through competing authority structures forming beside one another while still appealing toward overlapping revelation history. And viewers, the pressure intensifies there because shared vocabulary can temporarily create the appearance of continuity long after foundational divergence has already begun developing. And once identity becomes attached to preserving that appearance, examination becomes increasingly difficult, emotionally, rationally, and existentially. Viewers, the Qur'an acknowledges previous revelation repeatedly, Qur'an 5:46. And we sent, following in their footsteps, Jesus, the son of Mary, confirming that which came before him in the Torah. Yet simultaneously, the emerging Islamic ideology revelation structure progressively begins reframing critical theological foundations already established among the people of the book. And viewers, that tension matters enormously, because continuity claims alone do not independently establish continuity itself. Verification still remains necessary, especially once differences begin emerging surrounding the nature of revelation, prophetic succession, covenant structure, Christological identity, authority interpretation, theological finality. And this is where, viewers, the separation slowly becomes harder to reverse. Because once parallel authority systems fully begin forming, each structure increasingly starts governing identity, belonging, interpretation, legitimacy, spiritual authority, through its own internal framework. And that process rarely feels catastrophic at the beginning. It feels gradual. It feels reasonable, adaptive. And the nervous system adjusts slowly. The language adapts quietly. And eventually, people who once assumed continuity begin functioning inside increasingly different theological realities, while still using partially shared terminology. And viewers, that is how separation often advances historically, not only through conflict, through progressive reframing. And once reframing stabilises long enough, disagreement itself starts becoming structurally inevitable. The pressure deepens further because both systems now increasingly carry existential meaning, not just merely doctrinal meaning. Because once authority becomes attached to identity, agreement no longer feels purely intellectual. It begins affecting belonging, trust, legitimacy, inheritance, and existential security. And viewers, this is where behavioural governance systems become increasingly difficult to separate from theological allegiance itself. Because now the individual is no longer merely evaluating isolated claims. The person is slowly confronting the possibility that entire authority structures may not align fully together. Viewers, that realisation carries enormous psychological, spiritual, and existential weight, especially once loyalty, community, and inherited meaning have already attached themselves to structure being examined. But the unresolved question still remains standing. It's a critical question. Was Muhammad's emerging Islamic ideology revelation structure truly continuing the already established prophetic witness carried among the people of the book? Or was Muhammad's emerging Islamic ideology revelation structure progressively redefining it while simultaneously appealing towards its authority? That question cannot be settled through sincerity, nor through pressure, nor through expanding influence, because revelation continuity still remains accountable to verification, as demonstrated by the Bereans in Acts 17:11. That pattern remains critically important, because verified revelation survives scrutiny across chronology, theology, prophecy, and continuity testing. It does not require examination to disappear in order to survive. And once questioning becomes increasingly costly inside a developing authority structure, the atmosphere surrounding verification begins changing again, quietly, gradually, existentially. Viewers, I'm Dr. J.W. Ayub. I would ask you to like and subscribe to show that the channel is worth having. Press the bell if you like the content. Comment to educate me, and share the video to help somebody else. In the next episode, we're going to move into the consolidation of authority, because once separation stabilizes long enough, authority structures begin hardening around preservation, legitimacy, and expansion. Until then, viewers, bye for now.